Welcome everyone. In today's short lesson, we will focus on one of the most challenging concepts within modifiers, the absolute phrases. And these structures usually follow a subject-verb. You have a comma, followed by a noun phrase, plus a modifier. For example, you can have he studied for the GMAT, and after the comma you have the noun phrase an exam, and the modifier is that is challenging. Or sometimes you can have something very different. She left the GMAT testing center. You have the comma. This time the noun phrase begins with a possessive, her head. And the modifier is a past participle, held high. Those two are the most common structures within absolute phrases. A third structure could begin with the absolute phrase, and I've seen this only once. His score is the noun phrase. Higher than ever is the modifier. And after the comma, you have the subject plus the verb, he felt. Okay, so let's see how these structures are seen in real GMAT questions. For example, in question 1, you have the main clause at the beginning followed by which. And look at the split here. The first 3 options start with which, and the last 2 with a noun. Whenever you have a split between which and a noun, stick with the noun. Okay? Pick the noun. Why? Because which is usually ambiguous in these cases. For example, which showed has to make sense with planet, or sometimes which can go back a little bit to describe photographs of another planet. But which one is it? It's ambiguous. And remember, we need to pick a sentence that is clear. That's why repeating the noun removes the ambiguity presented by which. And we have 2 options left. Between those 2, you can go for showing or that showed, but there is something more important in this question. Be careful with the comparison with like. Indeed, you are comparing the Martian surface to be like the surface of the moons, and that possessive is wrong. You need moon alone, without the apostrophe s, so that you can compare the surface to the surface of the moon. In E, you have like, and you are comparing craters like the craters on the moon. So that works, craters with craters. That's why the best option was E. Be careful with the absolute phrase. You have a noun plus that modifier in this question. Another structure which is usually more challenging is this one. You're starting with a modifier, then you have the subject, which is Jupiter's moon, Europa, then the verb, has been considered far too cold to support life. Be careful with comma and. Remember that and creates parallelism. If I have a preposition after and with, usually you need a preposition before and. Something similar to with and with. Okay, preposition and preposition. So A is not parallel because there is no with before and. A doesn't work. So also be careful with the idiom. Consider needs to go alone. You cannot use consider as. Consider as is not idiomatic. Memorize that one. The correct idiom is consider X, Y. I consider you a good student. The GMAT is considered difficult. Adding as destroys the structure. So we have 2 options left, B or E. And E is wrong. Why? Well, because you have the subject Europa, and then there is no verb. Consider is a past participle modifier. That's why B was the best option. Now, do you see the absolute phrase in B? Notice that after the main clause, which is Europa has long been considered far too cold to support life, you have a noun plus a modifier. What is a noun? The noun is it's 60 square miles of water. And what is the modifier? The modifier is the past participle phrase thought to be frozen from top to bottom. So it starts at thought and it ends at bottom. That whole thing would be the participle phrase modifier. It's a past participle. So again, the absolute phrase in B also begins with the possessive it's. You have it's 60 square miles of water, that's your noun. Thought to be frozen from top to bottom is the modifier. Okay, so don't forget about that. And finally, in question number 3, this time we will start with the absolute phrase. Look at the word having. The word having and being are usually suspicious elements. The moment you see being, you should say maybe, oh, that could be wrong, and usually it is wrong. A, B, and D do not work. So be careful with being. How do you know whether being is necessary? Well, if you remove it, nothing should happen with the meaning of the sentence. So you have hand and arm, and you can just use crippled to describe hand and arm. Crippled would be a past participle modifier describing hand and arm. So you know that being is not needed because if you remove it, nothing happens. So between C and E, be careful with there. Usually adding the word there creates a wordy and awkward structure. Look, it says, because there had been a bullet. Where? Where is the bullet? It doesn't make any sense. So we're left with the absolute phrase. What is the absolute phrase? You're starting with the possessive his. His right hand and arm would be the noun phrase. And from crippled all the way to the end, you have a past participle modifier.